In this video, I'll explain how the codification of meaning in English and other languages work, how this codification depends on the identification of certain words, and it also depends on the units of analysis one focuses on. The units of analysis that we'll study today are utterances, sentences, and propositions, and these units will be explained and identified at different levels of abstraction. We'll also deal with words, but that's a different story. These two questions that we have here today are key issues in semantics. Do all words mean in the same way? Do they really do that? And the second question that I referred to in the previous slide is, what units of analysis do we need to understand semantics? So we have words, we have utterances, we have sentences, and we have propositions, and we're going to study them one after the other. Words. I'm sure you will be there thinking, am I really telling someone or watching someone that's telling me what a word is? I know what a word is. Yes, you do. You know what a word is, but you need to know more about words because your thoughts are encoded in language in many ways, and that's important. And one of these ways is using words. Any language is made up of words, basically. So here I am trying to explain something as obvious and as evasive as a word. So, what really words and understanding them depends on is how they are used and the company they keep. Words, when taken in isolation, can be used to refer in very basic situations. For example, when someone's learning a new language is helped by native speakers who point to objects and call the names, such as cat, dog, ball, blood, woman, baby, man, driver, etc. And then these words are specifically used to refer to specific entities in a very specific situation, and that's we understand them, and that's why we learn them. But when you say, for example, I'm going to buy a new car, it's another totally different situation. It's me thinking of buying a car. Then, in that situation, I can say, I'm going to buy a new car. The word car that you're using is here being used differently. It's used to denote, to refer to a whole class of entities that are under the name car. So, let's study now different classes of words. See, for example, the words table, wheel, or envy. These words are important because of what they mean, because of their meaning, and we use them because of that. But see, these are the group of words: or, and, for, under, and over. What happens to them? See these two examples. You and your husband are allowed to go in and see the patient. You hear that. Or you hear, you and your husband are allowed to go on to go into the room and see the patient. So the difference between these two sentences is just the words and or. And the meaning changes totally. In one case, you're allowed to go into the room, the hospital room, and in the second one, not both of you are allowed to go into the hospital room. So words like dog, hand, and sentences like feel embarrassed by someone's behavior capture concepts. They are important because they capture concepts. The first group of words, and, or for, and the like, are called functional words. And the words such as dog or hand or feel embarrassed by someone's behavior, which is a stretch of language that stands for a single word in certain occasions, are important because of what they mean. So, as I said before, the classes of words are of two types. The ones that are important because the meaning they convey, or the ones that are important because the role they play. So, do all languages capture the same idea in the same way? Well, not all languages capture the same idea or concept equally or in the same form, in the same way. For example, there's a Finnish word here, myotherapia, which is a single word that cannot be translated into a single word either in English or in Spanish. If you turned into English, there's a whole sentences for that. There's a whole sentence, just one single sentence, sorry. The feeling of being embarrassed for someone you're attached to. This has no equivalent in a single word as it is in Finnish. To get something more or less similar, you get to the noun phrase in Spanish that's called vergüenza ajena. That's the feeling that you get when you are watching someone that's making a fool of himself or herself. So it's something that's a feeling that's codified in one word in Finnish, in two words in Spanish, and in a stretch of words in English if you want to do that. So we are more or less revised these units of analysis and what we can use them for. Let's see something important, which is the degree of concreteness or of abstraction that these constructs have. If we start with utterances, utterances are words that we put together in speech, and they make sense, and we call them utterances. So utterances are real pieces of speech, and they are the most tangible side of language. We can produce them and we can hear them. Some authors also think that certain written samples in different documents can also be called utterances, but we're not going to deal with these opinions. Most linguists think that the defining feature of an utterance is its oral condition. The fact that we can produce certain combinations of meaningful sounds and that they can be heard and they can be understood by other people. And that's what is really important. What happens if we shake off the phonetic linguistic side of an utterance? If we go a little bit more abstract in trying to define a sentence. So we disregard all the phonetic side of an utterance and we are left with its syntactic content. That's what a sentence is. Sentences, therefore, are abstractions that we get when we shake off phonetics from utterances. And if we go up into a very highly abstract situation, well, propositions are so abstract that we'll need a few more slides to explain them. So summing up and challenging the definition of words, can we produce one-word utterances? Yes, we can, but only if we are in a strongly contextualized situation, where the general meaning is obtained from contextual information, because utterances are the most tangible side of language. They are real pieces of speech, but again, because utterances are so tangible, we can produce them and we can hear them, but there's little more we can do with them. Sentences, as I said before, are abstract grammatical entities. They are what you are left with when you shake off phonetic information. And what is left is a series of words where there are always the obligatory components of an English sentence. And an English sentence, syntactically, is, well, an English sentence, an affirmative English sentence, is made up of a subject, a verb, an object, an indirect object, a direct object, and several adjuncts. So this skeleton is what is left when we are talking about sentences. What happens when we are trying to put concepts together? How do we get to a proposition? You get to a proposition by filtering out that grammatical information that we've been talking about before and leave only the logical information. So propositions are somehow the skeleton of a sentence, because only the logical information underlying such a sentence is kept. Besides, propositions capture also logical and ontological information. Then what's ontological information? That's a tricky one. Ontological information is reduced to two kinds of concepts: entities and relations. So let's study these two sentences that we have here. My friend was bitten by a wasp, and a wasp bit my friend. Here we see that the wasp is the agent in this state of affairs in both cases. They are constructed differently, they are organized differently, but the naughty element is in both cases the wasp. My friend is the patient participant in both cases. My unfortunate friend is the poor one that is the patient participant in this state of a case, this state of affairs in both situations. What about that? Logicians are people studying and researching on logic, which is an important part of the organization of language, and that's why we are mentioning them here. Logicians discovered that certain elements of grammatical information were irrelevant for the logical background of sentences. For example, passive and active sentences share the same state of affairs. So, because of this, some of the ontological and logical perspectives are important, and some ontological and logical perspectives are irrelevant when we are dealing with passive and active sentences. The reason for syntax being irrelevant in both active and passive sentences is because they share the same state of affairs, the situation in which one thing does something terrible for the other. Because of this, when we filter out certain types of grammatical information, such activeness or passiveness, we get to propositions. In other words, propositions capture only the logic information out of sentences, and that's the important part of it. Summing up these distinctions, utterances are the more tangible and concrete units of description. They are recordable and we can identify them in speech. Sentences are grammatical abstractions that we absorb or extract from utterances, and that is why they are sort of the grammatical skeleton of utterances. We can shake off this phonetic information from utterances and then we get the sentences. If we keep on going up in this process of abstraction, propositions are like the logical skeleton of sentences. If we shake off the syntactic information out of sentences, then we get propositions. So the propositions are like the logical skeleton of sentences.